And we also heard anecdotes that employees were working longer, happier, summer hours, and so forth. So all the things you'd come to expect from a brand new building, like you'd see in a brand new car, were being very, very well enjoyed. But that wraps into today's discussion a little bit more just about how these systems and benefits can be measured. Corporate social responsibility for tenants is a very, very important topic. And they, the accounting firms, PwC has just done a new deal recently, just having that check mark, or that box checked, or that stamp of approval for being corporate and socially responsible is very, very important. For space standards, a lot of the tenants have been going to lower square footage per person, sometimes downwards to about 175 square foot per person for a professional services firm, lower to about 125 for, say, a major Canadian Schedule I bank. They've been going lower. But they will also at the same time create employee collaboration areas, meeting spaces, us spaces they call them now in some circles. CI Investments, they did a deal down at 15 York Street for a brand new building, 250,000 square feet. They have a 10,000 square foot rooftop deck. Anyways, what I'm trying to land on here is that the tenants are more demanding these days. The workforce, as HOK may have explained a little bit, is a little bit younger, more demanding. Probably like some of our kids in the younger generation are telling us. And for us to create these spaces, I hear it, and we hear it as brokers on the front line of what they want, what they need. And they are being very emphatic about hitting these top line issues. If the old buildings don't have it, they are severely disadvantaged. And that's a topic that Rick and I have talked about a lot. If the new buildings can do it, why are the old buildings not instituting and organizing and investing in these systems? And certainly if tenants on a large block scale, and I'm talking 50,000 square feet and up, 100,000 square feet would be a tenant that most new buildings would look at as a lead tenant, and for an anchor tenant status, probably 250,000 square feet in size. Certainly if they're looking in the marketplace for an issue like a lease expiry or just a pure growth, call it a problem, which is not a problem, it's a good thing happening for a company. The new buildings will elevate and escalate up to the top of the list for new relocation and business occupancy candidates. So, anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, you're not up the hook. You're stuck here for an hour. So, so now you have the landlords that I think it was Brookfield Place, and you built it, right? The new KPMG tower. So you have the big tenants come in and asking different questions. PwC Tower, great example, KPMG. So the landlords would tend to, I guess, go to the design and the engineering community and ask for advice. And I'm going to challenge you by starting saying that although the asks may be different, the engineering community has a certain way of working. And I'm not talking about your company, but in general, the industry, where it's like, well, we've been there, done that. We've been designing and building buildings for 50 years or so. Why not use what we have done, right? Margins are shrinking, so why do anything else or different? So how do you see, Armin, that shift now from trying to translate a little bit what Julian was talking about to actual designing buildings that meet those requirements rather than getting stuck in traditional ways of doing things?
Great question, Rick. I have to be careful because there's architects in the room. Julian alluded to, it's really in the last 10 years we've seen that shift. Up until that point, the architects really were in the role of master builder. They controlled everything, and architects still have a very important role to play. But in the last 10 years, there has been a shift. It's been led by technology, not only what goes in the building, but what the deliverables are that we turn over. So today you will still see engineers and contractors walking around with these big rolls of drawings, but there is a shift to an integrated project delivery. So that includes the model going from paper to a full computer-generated model, a BIM model, And so presently the industry is very comfortable with 3D modeling of the building. The next level of evolution is where we're doing clash detection. And presently the next step we're doing is integrating relational databases into the model. So what does that mean? It means that when you could do calculations, for example, you could take the model of the building, get the input of daylighting, and identify what the daylighting component inside the building is. You could have a database that does life cycle analysis and costing of the equipment. So the future of our business will be handing over a model that is used by the contractors and then on to the owner. That, for us, is a huge shift in the way we do our business. Similarly, what goes into the building and the way we design the buildings. And I said to Rick, the fact that we're here in a meeting with Cisco was unheard of 10 years ago. We just say, oh, look, that has nothing to do with us. There's some guy from the landlord or tenant end on IT who handles all of that. It is a big shift. The other thing is our industry is a bit slow to respond sometimes. So, the questions that come up, how come everyone isn't doing that now? We are in the middle of a transition that in the next little while, it should become clear. We'll have some discussion later on costing and who pays for what. But certainly in my mind, the future of our business is integrating all of those systems, having technology involved, both leading the design and in the deliverables of our product. So it's a really exciting time for our business.
So we have had a partnership with Ellisdon for 3-some years now, and as you said, these things also take time because some of the projects we have started to work on together is more than 3 years ago, and it's now that the doors are opening, if you will. When you look, Armin, from a pressure point, is it the landlords starting to really put some pressure on change, or a company like Ellisdon? And I say out of our experience, where we actually have found a tremendous driver of change in the construction, so almost bottom up, where we see the change happen.
Well, it's good that I have separation between Paul and I, because the problem is it's in a contractor's own interest to get as much scope and money as possible, and it's in the landlord's best interest to do it as lowest cost as possible. And we are always stuck in the middle. So, and again, we're seeing that change in this integrated project delivery when there's only, one neck to wring. We have no problem with that model. So, and you'll see that in the Ontario government, there is a big trend toward P3s. So we haven't seen that go fully into the commercial sector. And so we are constantly balancing the landlord's cost concern against the contractor who wants to get as much work as possible.
Well, so I'm going to now defend our
I'm going to
friends.
excuse myself.
I'm meeting over here.
But the last number of projects we've done with Ellisdon, and frankly some of them with your colleagues too, and you, Paul, this is where you need to chime in, where I haven't, and having come from that industry, not found Ellisdon or the contractor looking for more scope. As a matter of fact, I think when we look at this holistically, we've been able in a number of occasions to actually pinpoint areas where there is a significant reduction possible, arguably shrinking a little bit the scope. And I know you have been involved in a number of those now. Maybe you want to comment on that and then you put a challenge back, yeah.
Actually, in leading on from Julian's discussion about the one project with KPMG and Bay Adelaide Center.
Closer, sorry. Just
Can you hear me now? Sorry. With that particular project, it started in 2006, and I was fortunate enough to be the lead on that project. And it was the first office tower that came out in 20-some years in the downtown core of Toronto. And in that, we as a company embraced an idea to extend our ability to be very client first and go out to see what clients need more. And through that, at that time, there was LEED, really progressive at that time, leading out to the new challenges of the consultants, how you go forward. We took a next step into it in taking a look at the discussion that was brought to us from one of our directors, Stephen Foster. Rick came together with the Cisco joint venture and brought it forward to our president, who's a very forward-thinking individual, Jeff Smith, and they embraced this joint venture to take the building to the next level in integrating the systems, but more so becoming user-friendly in what the new age is of technology. And you've got to appreciate of the time, we are builders of the older day, or the day, as everybody said. With the new generation coming, we've seen it very quickly that we have to step forward fast or we're going to miss the bus. In fact, when we had the first year of discussion, we got down to the root of what we could possibly look at developing into our client-first relation and what we could sell to the developers, the owners, and the consultants in leading the front of amalgamating all the systems, or as much of the systems as we know them in the older day, to the newer technology. So as a working group, I think we spent about 2 years developing it, and we had the fortunate opportunity with Great West Life to make the first step forward with them. They kind of blindsidedly believed in what we were presenting to them. And actually we challenged them to the cost savings, where we would take the systems that we put in would be at a cost savings to the overall traditional way of, as we call it, the silo systems within a building. We would migrate them to a single riser system and collect data and then offer that data up for future add-ons from tenants, from users, through all of the devices that we knew were coming down the pipe fast and furious. So together we worked out the bugs on the first project, and then we carried it on to the next project, which actually went, which you'll see this afternoon, the ones that will do the travel to George Brown, where we had another client that is a little bit more than the normal client. It's an office tower. They are an educational facility. So as academics, they really challenged us. They said, okay, if you can do that, can you take it to the next level? Can you bring in media and do it interactive rooms, spaces, and go that next level? So again, we went back to the partnership and challenged ourselves and came back and worked with the college to work with their AV consultants and the rest of the main building consultants to migrate a total integrated system. So again, it's just taking that next step out. We firmly believe that the end result of what we are trying to do isn't for a dollar value, but it's for a user flexibility and integration into today's technology. And I think together that's where you either make your mark or not.
I'm agreeing, and I think part of the reason we're all here today, and to round out another area of Rick's question is, where is the world going? And just to use Toronto as an example, the first wave of construction, I referred to it earlier, 2006 it started, 2010 it ended. It was about 3.3 million square feet of new office space in downtown Toronto. First space in almost 20 years. This was the last building built. We're sitting in it before 333 Bay, and the other towers were 155 Wellington, RBC Dexia. The TELUS building just down the way near Union Station, and then the Chorus building was right beside George Brown. Well, those projects were pretty well pent-up demand driven, so they leased up very quickly. Once KPMG did their deal, 3 great law firms moved into the building very, very quickly. TELUS did their deal, Kinross Gold. Tenants flowed in very quickly because, to use an analogy, there hadn't been a new car built for quite a while. The next phase of development is going on right now, and it's becoming more competitive for tenants, and big blocks are being left behind, so the market's getting a little more competitive, and I think that the developers have to listen to the tenants a bit more. Where is that future going? And the wave after this wave, because there's 4 buildings under construction right now, 120 Bremner, Water Park 3, Bay Adelaide Center 2, and Globe and Mail, 100 Adelaide isn't quite going yet. But then, so there's another wave of 4 buildings, very, very sophisticated buildings. They're going to have to compete for tenants more. And the wave after that is another 4 buildings, which people are trying to pre-lease right now. For example, Cadillac Fairview's 60 in New York and others. And they are going to have to compete even more for tenants. Swing that back around to the supply-demand curve, and what's left behind, the musical chairs of real estate. The older buildings are left behind, and Rick and Cisco and Barnaby have talked many times about what are those old buildings going to do. It comes down to one main point. Everybody wants to have the green leaf stamp, the LEED acknowledgement. Everybody wants to have great retail and amenities around, great transport systems. But it comes down to money in the end. It really does. Every leasing decision, there's no use for buildings without tenants. Tenants always come down to the money. And if there's a payback on investments, and we've always talked about 10 years plus, in my world, it needs to be able to 2 to 3 to maybe 4 years plus. So if Cisco can develop these systems that can show measurable results on cost savings, tenants can enjoy these the first couple of years, or at least the first 5 years of the 10 or 15-year lease, and it is an absolute innovation in our business space. Absolute innovation. And I believe, I truly and personally believe, if you're not doing it, the landlords are going to get left with the dust. So call it a tenant-driven, market-driven, supply-demand-driven phenomenon in our market.
So it's like a tenant-driven. Are you seeing that tenants are increasingly sophisticated to ask the right questions? Because we heard earlier if we look at us as an enterprise, 80% or plus, you said, Lisa, right, is salaries, and it's only 10% is real estate, so who cares? And it's almost like irrelevant as long as I have my square footage. But that said, with PwC, we saw a great example where it was the tenant kind of stepping up as well, right, and driving. And do you see that across the board, where tenants are more demanding?
Like in all phases of our life, people are more educated, there's more source of information, there's fantastic conferences that corporate real estate executives go to. Anybody that all four of us would want to deal with are going to be large tenants. They're going to have a corporate real estate department. Those corporate real estate executives and employees are going to be charged with, learning the newest, most fascinating space delivery mechanisms and models from all around the world to deliver to their tenants. I would venture to say that there are larger than 50% of the tenants out there that we're talking about will be telling the landlords, how to drive their next building. KPMG, for example, was driving, remember the generator? So generator for uninterrupted power for the not just life safety systems, for I think for 6 or 8 of their 12 floors to be 724, 365. So that's just one example from 2006 that we can use today, but there are many more that are going to press forward. So I'm very clear on that.
I was just going to identify a couple of things. So when we, you talk about the evolution of a building, a lot of the building blocks in a building that are important to tenants, things like the generator and the standby power, as part of this technology revolution, the ability to transfer the information, whether you want to call it measurement and verification, it's sort of opened up a whole new value-add service that can be put onto the network. You can tell exactly what that generator is doing, what the UPS is doing, whereas before, you have guys running around a building, writing down nameplate information. So, and that's part of the, the differentiation, the value-add service that I think all of us are trying to bring to the table. Many tenants are sophisticated, but and they say, yeah, I need a generator, but you need to identify, well, not only can we give you the generator, well, we can tell you exactly what that generator is doing, we can help in the life cycle costing of it, and all of that is platformed on the network where, again, never before, that is a real change in the whole measurement and verification information that you can bring to tenant or landlord.
Just back to the money. So we're all talking about rents. Rents drive asset value. Most of the 87% of the central business district buildings in Canada are owned by 5 major players, and 4 of them are pension funds. And they all like long, steady, continuous income flows. And back to what we're all talking about, the building. These buildings being built for a very, very long period of time. It's these systems, and what Armin's talking about is just what drives the ingredients, the DNA, the fabric, drives asset value for these landlords. And that's what's very, very, very important for these owners who are many of our pension funds and our advisors.
So now you have owners that want these intelligent, smarter buildings because of cost reduction, more revenue. So they're looking for the single throat to choke, right? One company that ideally can do it all. I think we could talk about that more, as I think we see that. Now we've worked on a project with Don, and we looked at specifications that came out. It was, I think, a healthcare facility, intelligent, and then it actually says the air conditioning systems need a PC Pentium, 2 PC in the basement with a CRT 17-inch screen to control it. So somewhere this thing still seems to break down. Right? The customer wants something very innovative, but then somewhere hidden in the specification, which is like this thick, wasn't it? It asks for those things. And I look at the engineering community. How do we get kind of out of that siloed approach still, which I think is what probably holds this industry back? And I think you talked about integrated project delivery. And we introduced yesterday our innovation center as a place where we want to come together with maybe not unnatural, but uncommon relationships and be able to co-create and think about these things together.
Right. Well, first off, I hope the answer is the owner wanted it all siloed in the specification. But this relates to an earlier issue we all alluded to. Our industry is slow to change. Lots of people will say, absolutely, I want full convergence, I love the innovation. Oh, but by the way, write the specification siloed and give me an option to go innovate. That mentality still exists because many landlords, owners, they haven't had the pricing in front of them. I know that Don is one of the contractors trying to break that mold. And again, we're not supposed to name projects here, but I know there's one project that's under discussion right now. They're not 100% convinced. Lots of costing analysis going on, but there still is a mentality of, oh, give me a base building spec with silos and an option, demonstrate to me the savings. So hopefully, you're right at the cusp of seeing that change in that philosophy. But it's going to take time, and you need, there are a few firms that are leading the charge, and again, I assume everyone who's in this room is aware of it and committed to it, because it certainly is changing the way we do business.
So Paul, you said you guys kind of took somewhat of a leap of faith and looked at this whole concept. If you look at your the life in a day of Paul, where do you see kind of the pressure points or the obstacles to really push this industry? Is it still a landlord conversation, disconnect because of money or no proof points or no evidence, or is it within the construction industry itself? And how would you see a big company like yourselves be able to trigger this change?
Our approach is because where we're at typically in the projects we're speaking about, we're construction management. We're not a lump sum contractor as what used to be in the days past, where we would bid plans and specs and just deliver as a builder. As a CM in this joint venture, we've stepped out in that role and putting to the table early the options to the owner and the consultants and sometimes the tenant, because at times in one particular project the tenant's actually there with us, and promote these options, and just not promote them, we prove them through cost analysis. And again, for the value of what we see we're promoting is not a value that we see losing. We see gaining the future client relationship from delivering the workspace. And I think Rick and Steve, as we toured PwC with a tenant to show the new tenant we have, a previous tenant that's happy, a simple example of the savings that we generated to the tenant side after we developed the base building was that that tenant eliminated all of the light switches in their space. They utilized the phones to control their lights. So right there, that was a direct credit. The phones were already coming. It was just a new media tool that now that user sitting at their desk could interface with the lights. And the big comment back from the property manager as she toured us around was that the actual person working at the workstation would prefer to have their lights off while they're using their terminals, their computers. And with this, using it over the phone, eliminated calling a maintenance guy to go and try to program down, and all of that stuff was eliminated by a very simple, early in the design decision and discussion that really it just produced money and gave those tenants that luxury that made their space, as the lady from HOP said, you're developing a space for the user. So that person wants to sit in front of their PC and not be affected by the light and the glare, and they're sitting there happy.
And sometimes that's difficult to put a quantitative value on, but you know, when you talk to people, control over their environment is one of the single biggest, you know, wants that they have. So again, migrating onto the network, you can control lighting, you can control temperature. You know, there's a big move to decentralized mechanical systems. So in our mind, and I think in others, zero premium cost, you all of a sudden have total control of almost individual workstations. So that is another big trend in our business. Again, tough to put a value add number on it, but you ask people, that's what they want. They want to control their own environment.
So in the old world, and I say the old world, it still happens, the systems were designed on their own networks because it was kind of
We used to
carved
have
out.
individual drawings, like, you know, we'd have a different title block, different drawing for each system.
And there's benefits to that because you just carve out that responsibility, the risk, which you hand over to someone else, right? If that fails, then you know it's only that company's or person's fault. Now we migrate to this world where there's one kind of fiber backbone and becomes this, what we call then the fourth utility.
And that's our expression.
Yeah, we trademarked it, so you fight us over it. But I'm glad we share the expression. But now, who now is responsible for that? Because mechanical, electrical, everyone uses it, including PwC, right? The tenant. And if that breaks, so who manages that and does that time? I'll start with you, Julian, and I know you all have an opinion on that. Does this smell again like the CLEC, the developers that wanted to own the network and sell services, and a lot of them lost their shirts over it? So how does your world respond to that idea, again, of one network as a managed offering?
I have a short answer this time. It's more, it's trending towards the developer having control. The tenants have all grown up. They understand that the laptops don't go down anymore. Rarely does our BlackBerry go down anymore. But I think people have grown up in the world, and they will trust other people with a certain component of their systems. And it gets to a point, Rick, where it's part of the building, much like the CLEC, much like the generator issue. Tenants used to want full control over their generator, their UPS, their fuel storage, the access to the fuel on the fly component of that. Now, many of them have handed over to a landlord. The landlords do their checks and balances, and there's periodic reviews to make sure everything's maintained as necessary. I think they've grown up, they've grown into it, and it's a trend towards the landlord.
I was going to identify from a design point of view, it's significantly more complicated. We're lucky in our firm, we offer all of the disciplines. So picture what's on the network now. Go to the Innovation Center. You've got mechanical engineers looking at all the air handling units, chiller plant, boiler plant. You've got electrical engineers looking at the critical systems of UPS, generators, lighting control, security. So, and the industry has responded, separate specification sections related to the network and the integration. But you need to be able to have access to that entire team to get the inputs to allow to make a seamless set of documents to avoid any finger pointing. Again, it goes back to that integrated project delivery model. It all has to be integrated into the BIM model. It's handed over a contractor who's committed to implementing that vision, and you have to recognize that the network is the fourth utility. So historically, it was mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and now we have a whole, need a specialist group that has to be fully knowledgeable in the network and all aspects of it. So So that is another big change for us.
So from an from an operations perspective, you're building now this one network and you connect everything, or tell all your vendors and suppliers to connect to it. Who now controls that network? I mean, the landlord probably doesn't want to do it themselves. Who do they call?
Well, I think there's two steps to that, I think. You're thinking outside of the box now. I mean, everybody line face that connection at the property line. So you do all this history is shown, all of these individual silos of information going up and down the building by different trades. So each consultant designed their own, and be it mechanical, electrical, or what have you, did their own. But when you get to the wall, in a lot of cases, you went to the street and you had a fiber optic line that was provided by a utility. So really, first we brought the utility inside the building and rose it to the top of the building. So that's the highway. The highway is an extension of that common backbone now in the building that the landlord really has a control over, but he has a control over a better system than what he had before, because the multi-cables, as we all know, are now down to what should be used today in the current age, a fiber optic connection. All of the other systems integrating to that, the interface, are then to the owner, operator of the building, to then have the ability to either share that with the tenant or option it to the tenant to build their own. Again, I think it's more of a co-share decision.
What I wanted you to say was that you, being Alice Don, now get into the business of kind of operating and managing that. So where traditionally you as a construction company build it and then you hand over the key and you walk away, now you kind of have the option to stay and actually play a different role, right? Which I know you do.
That's the next step that we've taken beyond this, is now as the infrastructure has been put in within the joint venture, we then will take the next step as providing the option of operating the backbone and the system as with our joint venture.
So where I was heading with that is now you have an industry that, to your point, is slow to change, but there's now openings for either existing companies to take on additional responsibilities and maybe build new businesses. And you've done it, right? And I was wondering what you guys, if you see that now, that there's a new need for a new breed of company, a new kind of industry showing up that has the ability to disrupt a world that we know so well and hasn't changed for the last 20 and 30 years.
Absolutely. There's different building types have different needs and have evolved to different solutions. So for example, at Pearson International Airport, they were ahead of the curve. They have they call it their common cabling system and network. All the tenants, every airline plugs into their network and they manage that network. They were one of the early proponents. If you look at large healthcare facilities delivered in the P3 model in Ontario, contractors such as Ellis Dawn, they give them famous names like Progico, they will install, manage for 30 years the entire network related to operating the building. That is an absolute brand new service. And that, you're going to see the migration of that model, I think, into every building type. If you have a university or a college building where they own everything and they are, owner-tenant, you will see that model. Absolutely new businesses, lots of opportunity, not enough people in that business offering that service in our business. I know we're looking to grow that, and we cannot find enough people who have that knowledge base. So absolute great opportunity for sure.
I was just going to add on very quickly that it should move fast. It's our opinion, my opinion, that our company, that this whole industry should move fairly fast. Mainly because of the earlier point I made, the concentration of ownership. The Cadillac Fairviews of the world, the Oxfords of the world, the Bentall Kennedys, the Brookfields, they own numerous buildings concentrated in marketplaces. So they can have central economies of scale, building towards, again, managing the money, doing it for a cheaper cost per unit over a larger portfolio. So this theoretically, this should move relatively quickly compared to some of our other innovations in our business, pure construction. So
I'll have a follow-up question on this, but I also want to keep on going. I figured, yeah.
So architects are paid typically 1% of the construction cost. So why, as an architect, would I not want a standard operating building, which is historical, that everybody has the learning curve on? Why would I want to integrate systems and spend a lot more time and work, maybe 2 or 3 times to work on something brand new, and yet be paid 1/3 of the fee, in fact, because the fee is based on 1% of the total. In other words, I do more work and I reduce your operating costs and your CapEx, but I'm doing more work and new work and so on. So what the question is around, how do we remove the economic disincentives for collaboration?
Actually, we don't think there is a disadvantage or any economical disadvantage whatsoever. As we were in a meeting before, we were doing a presentation, and that came almost verbatim from the consultants. And I looked at them as well as the owner and said, we'll do it right the first time, and you will spend less money because we will walk you through how we propose the system will be. And it will be, by virtue, a lot easier than you individually trying to design something down the road and change it. So we bring the design solution to the system, to the consultants at the early day, so they only design it once. So the value of the project isn't lessening that greatly, that percentage fee by an architect. So if you recognize what we do, we think all parties involved in the project will be rewarded tenfold by the end user being more happier in this type of environment.
Well, let me rephrase the question. Do you feel that doing new things requires more work than doing what you've always done, that everybody knows by rote?
It does at the start, like I use the example of BIM and the Revit. The first couple of jobs were painful. You know, there are increased hardware and software costs in the office, the training of staff. You know, our industry responded by saying, there's a 20% premium on Revit. I go to our guys now, they say, and I trust them, you know, and we've analyzed it, the premium is 0 if you start at day 1. If the architect is part of our team with the contractor, we have a resource, we have a whole, you know, BIM manager. If the model is set up correct at day 1, 0 premium. So, same thing, you know, we need to be less afraid of the fees. You know, look, we'll go to the table if we're not getting enough fees, we'll come up with a different model and the percentage of construction costs. So, you know, with value add services, we are entitled for fair compensation, I agree 100%. But, you know, the new model, it is less work for architects, it's more work for engineers, right? We want to be compensated. There's a whole new service, network design and integration, but for architects, it should be easier with a better product to the owner.
You say network, so there's an ICT component. Someone has to design the network.
Absolutely.
But now you have your mechanical guys
Yeah.
designing a mechanical system. Arguably, they design less because they're leveraging what the ICT guys are doing.
Correct.
So
Everyone.
you see dollars move around.
Yes, the dollars move around again. In an integrated services firm like ourselves, you need to make sure, and again, they're professional engineers, they're smart guys. We need to identify where the demarcation is between where mechanical ends and whether you call it the air handling unit controller, and what the protocol is going on to the cloud. Everyone likes to draw the bubble of the cloud. So you need to have the discussion internally to make sure every discipline understands where the cutoff is. You need to have each respective specification section, you know, aligned with that cutoff, and you got a new specification section, network design and integration. So,
But if you look at the building as a whole, like everything else, you're going to have some pluses and minuses. At the end of the day, we feel strongly that actually it's a savings at the end of the day. And the benefits to the owner is one that you can't recognize because the value of their happiness is priceless.
it's like that commercial.
That's it. You know, like it's really the end user that you want to please. And that's the person that has to sit in that workspace every day. So as much as we can as a team do our job at the beginning of the job, it should be not a cost issue for the project.
If you link that question to my industry, my answer would be simply, if I don't expand my knowledge base in these categories and areas, I'm not even invited in the room. Like, I don't get a chance to consult. we have to keep up with the Joneses, we have to keep up with the rest of the world, and educate ourselves with our peers in the industry just to become better and more efficient. Have a simple answer. Market driven.
But Jim's point, and I guess change is scary, right? In every industry, and BIM is a great example. First time you loaded Autodesk and BIM and Revit, and you have a learning curve, and that, I think that's probably what you mean, Jim, where people say, well, that's going to cost me. I think what I hear you both say is that may appear so in the beginning, but if we work together, there is more benefit than cost, and it really shouldn't be more. I don't know if Lisa agrees. Yeah, I was like,
I was going to say,
she was
we
there.
have a mandate globally to move everything to BIM technology, and we're well along that path in all of our project teams. So
without charging more.
without charging more. So there is a cost to do that training, but whether it would be training in that or training in the next evolution of AutoCAD or training in, former project manager, there's continual training in any organization. I think if you're not training, you have a whole separate issue. So I think this is, we see the value in it and our entire platform.
So you talk about training, and it's within a company. How do you guys share, or your industries, how do you tap into one another and competitors maybe, and how does the industry learn? So as an industry, we move forward. So we're not relying on, an Ellisdon and an MMM, because you maybe have few that kind of get this. And yesterday we mentioned that from a Cisco perspective, we in Canada have teamed up with the Canadian Green Building Council, and we are globally very tight to Coronet on the tenant side and the Urban Land Institute. Where are the places where you learn from each other, if any?
Well, my answer is, it's forums like this, and I gotta be frank, there aren't enough of them. A lot of our, the collaboration seems to be done on a project basis. You don't have enough dialogue in our industry because we're too busy doing our core work, which is either engineering or building or leasing. So, and that's where I guess self-directed learning comes in. You've got to make the time for events like this, see what's out there. And then each respective discipline, there's courses and seminars, but you've got to step up to the plate. You've got to be committed in the vision. You have to get feedback from tenants, and that to create the better product. And I think our industry, I hope as professionals that we are fast and quick to evolve, but between us girls, as I say, I'm not convinced I see it. So there's still lots of drawings sitting on tables. So,
You guys? No, I can say.
Mine would be an infomercial for Cisco, so I.
Go ahead. Shh. Go ahead.
For me, it's a competitive advantage, so I don't like to share with too many people. But my link is Cisco. My link is Rick, and we got together 4.5 years ago and started discussing some of these innovative topics, and we've used it selfishly. And although we like to talk to our building partners as a broker, we're a bit selfish. But our link is Cisco.
Good.
wow, that is a
That's a great close. Now, I have one more question, but we talked about, you mentioned cloud, and now we build, you design buildings, you build buildings, and your customers now own buildings that have everything interconnected and automated, right? So we have now the ability to draw data out of the buildings. And we hear more and more about analytics and cloud and data, and now there's talk about how can we turn that around and give maybe the landlord or the tenant ways to monetize that data or use it to do something exceptional. So where you guys see, if at all already, because maybe we take this step by step and we'll be happy when we connect the buildings first, but do you guys have an opinion, or do you see a view as to where data is becoming really the next differentiator for buildings?
Yes, I do, Rick. That's a good point. I don't know if we've crystallized the vision, but information is money. So certainly measurement and verification and an understanding of what the building's doing. Again, from an engineering point of view, you talk about utility consumption. How can you optimize it? Where are the problems? Reliability, what's happening with the generator, the UPS. Those things are easy to get that information and to go to tenants and landlords. The issue we're discussing in-house with our group is, it's come up from landlords, how can I get more money from the tenant for those network services? And that's something we're struggling with a bit, and we need some time to see how the industry crystallizes that. You know, in the end, dollars count. You go into an existing building, it is not cheap. How can we get, you know, tenants, how can we monetize that? And so some of it's easy, you know, energy savings, but other things, again, are more difficult to monetize. So building systems as it relates to mechanical, electrical infrastructure, very easy. Measurement and verification is a whole new field going onto the network. On the data, we're waiting to see how the industry responds.
Maybe you, Paul, and
I think I generally agree. Similar same. It's going to be more, I think, the user-driven. You know, once they get, I think, connected more to the data, there's going to be more demand than I think we even could imagine. But once they grab it, as you can see in the buildings we've done, there's already questions. Can we do this? Could this be possible? And how do you interconnect this building to a building in Chicago? And how can they do validations of their building here with this? The more data that you can tap into, it's like everything else in the world. It's a data world. So the quicker you can share it, the more you're going to be finding ways to capitalize on it, improve it, and package it to whatever the user wants. Because really, again, it comes down to that user space. They want the flexibility and control.
My answer again is going to be an extension of some of my previous answers. It will probably end up back in the landlord's lap, data in the landlord's lap. And I say this because of constant recurring theme in my answers. Landlords are concentrated, they're efficient, they are sophisticated. But it goes back to another very important piece of data. And we're talking about big tenants, right? We're always talking about big guys and girls. And today, at our company, we run a stat for our salespeople to understand what customers should we be going after. And again, because we're in Toronto, I'll use the stat for here, but the average size tenant in the central business district of Toronto is 7,500 square feet. Not 50, not 100,000 square feet. And so you deal with the lead tenants come in for the first 200,000 and a couple 50s, and the building is half leased. Well, the rest of the building, the landlord is leasing to smaller, indigenous type tenants, consulting firms, maybe a Japanese bank that's only 7,500 square feet here. And those tenants want to have nothing to do with that data. They want the landlord to run it. And arguably, they're probably about half the skyscraper, half the building. So it's probably going to figure itself out in that regard. And I don't think I'll be wrong.
any maybe final thoughts or questions from the crowd? Anybody? Nobody?
It was so
You
clear.
have- Yeah, Jim? You have one?
Yeah, economists would say if that was really $1,000 bill on the ground, somebody would have already picked it up. So how do you deal with the skepticism of the owners who don't believe the business case that you're presenting? Or do you have to give them a win to begin with and a saving right at the get-go and then say, now have faith in me to integrate more systems?
Great point.
Yeah, and I believe that's the model of where the owner may say, prove it to me. So we have the two documents, right? You say, here's the siloed model. Mr. Owner, do you understand that? Yeah, old school. Here's the alternate, fully networked. Let the industry price it in a competitive bid environment. And I think Ellis Don has got case studies that prove it. But, I agree, there are many owners and clients out there who still, if you want to use the word skeptical, but they need to be proven. But I am absolutely convinced that if we had the same seminar in a year, there'll be a lot more people say, oh yeah, we priced it out. We have jobs that were on the list there that are, those owners are asking for that kind of documentation. They want to be, they want to see the numbers that there is a saving, and you let a competitive bid environment demonstrate.
I would say that the economist has probably looked at his own home, where years ago you would have your cable coming in through your TV, you'd have your cable coming into the phone, and you'd have all these devices. Look at it today. Go buy a bundle. You know, you have devices that are interconnecting on one line. It's where we're going.
Well,
It's
That's a great
That's it,
analogy.
right? You know, so you want to run your TV, your home entertainment theater, you want to do it from your car when you're getting home, you don't want to deal with two service providers, just one guy. Just give me one service and don't recable my house. They're doing it.
And it's all done wireless.
That's right.
You don't even use those cables, they're sitting in
That's
the
right.
wall, you don't use
And
them.
we're just leading forward quicker in the commercial industry than that in the residential industry.
So, Julian, how can you help us get all your landlord customers?
I go back to my realism model. I fully agree with that point. Excellent point. However, I think that economist is about 6 years old. And what was that, grade 3, 2, grade 2? So it's just a very young stage right now. Just, you know, you see the commercials of the people with their iPhone and they can now receive and deposit checks over their iPhone. You know, that's so new to people. Back to the building cycles. There haven't been a lot of new buildings in Canada, North America. U.S. overbuilt, they're suffering, but Canada was very pragmatic, very prudent in their approach. They would not finance and develop buildings until there was a tenant. So the whole wave of development, I got a great graph, I'd love to show you, I have it in my bag, just how the development was, there was nothing going on for 15 or 18 years, and all of a sudden, there is the opportunity now. There wasn't the opportunity, that $1,000 bill wasn't there, and hasn't been there for very long. I agree with your point fully, but I think it's just a matter of catching up.
Yeah, I agree, it's a matter of catching up.
And the leader is going to win by strides. Pioneers.
Dimitri?
What Cisco equipment do you use specifically in your project?
What Cisco equipment? I have no idea.
I have to say, we're a professional services firm, we're vendor neutral. But again, we have strong alliances with Cisco. And, you know, so the full gamut of all their network products are included in our specifications.
If you don't mind, Dimitri, so Stephen is going to take us to George Brown College. Tomorrow we see PwC Tower. And Stephen, is it a fair question for you to answer as we go through
Absolutely,
exactly
yeah.
Absolutely.
That's great.
what's being installed, and is that all right?
Sure.
And you're going to see it too then? Yeah.
Tomorrow.
And today?
Today.
Like after
Hands
lunch
on.
and tomorrow?
And write down all the numbers.
And if then it's still not clear, then we'll make sure we get you the bill of materials. Great. Well, with that, I want to thank the panel. I hope this was an interesting conversation. I think we're in the midst of a major transformation, and I know we've been saying that for a while, but I know from our perspective in the Canadian marketplace, we've been kind of working with you guys for 4 or 5 years, and I would say it's in the last year, and probably because some of the first buildings have come online, so we have a real demonstrable proof point. We can actually take people there and show it. I see it's been triggering other developments to kind of ask for it and say, how's it going to help us? So I agree. I think it's a matter of time. And Jim, I think the proof points are there. We're going to need your help to document some of it, as we said yesterday. And that I think we're going to see this now accelerate, because in every aspect, and I think you heard it here, and we figured it's good to hear from other than Cisco, that it's time and it's right. So thank you very much. Thank you for your help. We're going to have, we leave here at 2 o'clock. I think you gentlemen are available. If there's any kind of questions or one-on-ones, please feel free to have a chat with them.